Part 3, we're back for our talk on social psychology. We just talked about the horrible true story of Kitty Genovese and how people tend to have diffusion of responsibility where there's a lot of people present, less likely to respond they are. Yeah, that's because of the bystander effect. But then we left off with asking a fundamental attribution error question. Here's my question for you now. Let's imagine you're driving down the highway and you see a construction worker drop a wrench on his foot. We'll say it's a he. And you see him jumping around in pain. The question I want to ask you is, what can you accurately tell me about that man's intelligence? You just saw him drop a big old wrench on his foot. He's jumping around in pain. He's wearing his hard hat and construction gear. What can you tell me? Some of you may say, he's not so smart. Some of you may think, well, he's not too coordinated. But my question is, what can you accurately tell me about that person's intelligence? And the only correct answer is nothing. You know nothing about his intelligence. In fact, you don't even know if he did that on accident. For all you know, maybe that guy was doing it on purpose because he wanted to make his friends laugh. Or maybe he was trying to get disability. Maybe that person is one of the smartest people on the planet. Maybe he's the CEO of the company that the government has contracted out to rebuild the highway. You don't know, and that's the point, but we think we know. And that's the fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error is believing we know something when we have so little evidence of the fact. So the error is underestimating all of the outside circumstances. We do this for very specific reasons. We feel more comfortable if we believe we know so much more than we actually do. When we look down the street and we see one person or another person or someone gets on the bus wearing such an outfit, we like to believe that we know something about that person. But in reality, you know nothing. You don't know anything about motives. You don't know anything about personality, intelligence. You know nothing. But we'd like to think we know. And that is the fundamental attribution error. It's something you'll need to know for your test. But we talked about Kitty Genovese. We talked about Stanley Milgram. These true stories that are pretty intense. But let's also talk about self-serving bias when we're talking about attribution. The self-serving bias is typically when you do something right, you believe you deserve all the credit. But when something goes wrong, you don't blame yourself, you blame everyone else. If you play video games online, you hear this all the time. When someone's doing great, oh yeah, you can't teach this, boom, boom, headshot, whatever, they're just bragging. But then if something goes wrong, it's their teammate. Where were you? Where were you on that? Like, you're supposed to have my back. Man, you suck. You're garbage. You're trash. Or even if it's a sport, like, is this ball regulation size? And Susie, I'm trying to serve over here. You're breathing like an asthmatic. Right? That's the idea of self-serving bias. There's something else known as the modesty bias or the self-effacing bias, and that's the opposite. And unfortunately, that's pretty rare in our individualistic society of America, which is where when you do something right, you give everyone else the credit. No, you. No, I did it because of you. I couldn't have done it without the coach. I couldn't have done it without my great team. I'd like to thank God, right? That's the modesty bias. And when something goes wrong, you blame yourself. Yeah, this is my fault. You know, I tried hard, but maybe I should have studied harder, whatever. That is the modesty bias versus the self-serving bias. But let's move on in this adventure of social psychology, and we're going to talk about Solomon Asch's true experiment, 1950. Because here's what I want you to ask yourself. Let's suppose that you were walking by the Stanley Milgram experiment, and you saw the man in trouble, but a whole bunch of other people were walking by too. Would you help him? We already discussed that less people would be likely to help them because there'd be more people, hence the Kitty Genovese story. But what about you participating? Let's suppose you're the participant and you're shocking the learner, that overweight gentleman. What if there's a whole room of you that were shocking him? Would you be less likely or more likely to refuse to continue? Well, I think the answer is relatively obvious. So what if there's a room full of teachers in the Milgram experiment? Would you be the only one to stand up? Because Solomon Asch wanted to do a research experiment, and this is what he did. He got a whole classroom full of Confederates. I'm not talking Civil War. I'm talking Confederates are actors that are actually on a research team, but they're pretending to be regular participants. So these Confederates, a whole classroom full of Confederates, except one participant comes in. And the one participant thinks that they're amongst a whole bunch of other participants, and Solomon Asch gives a very easy experiment. He asks the class, hey, here's a standard line. Which of these lines, A, B, or C, are most similar in length to the standard line? Is A similar to the standard line, B, or C? Well, as we look at this, the obvious answer is B. But here's the thing. Those Confederates, they were told to provide the incorrect answer. So let's suppose you're sitting in there and you think everyone else is a participant and he's going down the line and everyone's saying A. The answer is A. The answer is A. The answer is A. And then it comes to you. Are you going to say B, which clearly looks like the right answer, or would you say A? Because this experiment is all about conformity. Because most people that were in this experiment legitimately would go ahead and they would say A, the wrong answer. They'd follow along with the Confederates. Why would they do that? Well, it's because the Solomon Asch's experiment is actually all about a vocabulary term known as conformity. This is the conformity experiment. They wanted to see if people would follow along. And 76% of the participants totally conformed to the wrong answer choice. Now that's really scary to think of because we'd like to think, oh, I would totally say the right answer regardless of what everyone else said. But according to this research experiment, 76 of the participants totally conformed. Why would they do such a thing? Well, there's two general reasons for conformity. Informational social influence and normative social influence. Informational social influence is what most of the participants claimed. They believed everyone else had some information they didn't. Like, I missed something. I don't know. Maybe my eyes are deceiving me. I must have missed some type of information. Everyone has some information that I don't. I'll give you another good example of informational social influence. Imagine this. You're walking down the street of New York City, right? Minding your own business. But then from around the street corner comes 30 people just storming past. Ah! And they're screaming with panic in their eyes and their voice. Ah! And they're looking over their shoulders. Ah! And they run. Now, you could, if you want to, you could just step aside and let them run right by you and then keep continuing forward, going in the direction from which they're running. Would you do that? Chances are you would turn and you would start running with them as well. Why would you do such a thing? Because you're assuming they know what they're running from, so you want to get out of there as well. Because you don't want to risk sticking around to find out what they know. That's the idea of conforming because of information that you believe other people have. Then there's normative social influence. That is, you do it because you want to belong to the group. Let me ask you this. Would you wear your underwear on the outside of your pants instead of the inside of your pants or outfit if everyone else started to? You'd probably say no, but realistically, you would. And you may fight me on this, like, there's no way I'd start wearing my underwear on the outside of the pants, Mr. G. There's no way. But the reality is, you probably do this all the time without even realizing it. For instance, what are you supposed to wear to a job interview? If you want the job, you want to dress snazzy, what do you wear? You're probably wearing a tie. Either of your male or female ties, or at least you're dressing to the nines, as they say. But why are we doing this? Ties, let's think about ties. How much sense do ties make? What function do they do? Are they holding up your shirt? No, that's ridiculous. You should look into the history of the tie. It makes no sense. It's actually something that used to be worn into battle to brag to the opponents that you're so confident that you'll defeat them in battle that you're wearing a noose around your neck. But yet nowadays, if you want a job, you're expected to wear a suit at the job interview. That makes no sense, but you want to follow along and be part of the normative, right? You want to be part of the normal. So this is conformity. And Solomon Asch researched conformity. On your test, I'm going to ask you, hey, who researched conformity? You're going to want to match that up to Solomon Asch. So let's get back to the Stanley Milgram experiment because we never actually talked about who got in trouble. Well, let me tell you who got into trouble. It's pretty interesting. Learner keeps on complaining. Eventually, he's not responsive anymore. But before we go back to the experiment, What if I told you that instead of being called the teacher, you were called the torturer? Would you be more likely to keep on going, or would you be less likely? So instead of learner and teacher, it's, hey, you've got the torturer, and we'll say the tortured. Would that change your willingness to participate? And if you started participating, would that change how far you'd be willing to take it? Well, according to Zimbardo, the answer is that would totally make a difference because of what you understand, what it means to be a torturer. And we'll cover that in the next segment, part 4. Yeah, because this is part 3. We're going to finish this up with part 4, I hope. Let's do this. I got to find